Can I go back real quick? So you said something about now you're coaching at the level above mindset. And I'm curious what that level is. I don't know that I've ever heard anyone articulate that before.
It is the level above mindset. Life is changing, right? Life is changing. Like our society is changing, but life itself is different than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Like, have you noticed now that personal growth is no longer optional, right? I remember like in the 90s, you could ignore your personal growth for 5 years and just stuff it in the closet, right? But now it's not. Personal growth is like there. And this process I discovered on how to coach above that level started about 5 to 7 years ago. But the simple way to describe it is, let's just imagine I was creating a diagram here. I'm going to give you a simple diagram. So for example, let's say we've got a small circle that says action, right? As human beings, when we want something, we know we need to take an action. Action will get us what we want. Now, if we know what the action is, it works. But what happens if we're not getting what we want? The action's not working. We need to think about it differently. So we have one circle here. Now let's have a bigger circle around that. Well, the bigger circle, we'll call that mindset, right? So action and mindset. So the actions you take are based on the mindset, right? Your mind, right? It controls your hands. So your mindset determines the ideas, the thoughts, the experience, the strategies that you were able to execute. Now, if you are trying to do something you haven't done before, I'm trying to get a second income, I'm trying to buy a property, I'm trying to raise money, I haven't done it before, I don't know how, that is beyond your mindset. You don't know what the strategy is. And a lot of times we start copying other people's strategies and things like that. What I've noticed though, is that life responds to us. Right? Have you ever noticed life responds to you? There's times when life goes great and you can't lose, and there's times that life sucks and you can't win. I've discovered what I believe is how life responds to you. And if we kind of regress back to 7th grade science class, we're all made of atoms, which is pure energy, which is 99.999% free space, right? It's not even solid, which is really hard to comprehend. We know we're pure energy. So does it make sense that this being of person of pure energy that is interacting with this reality that's also pure energy responds to them? Does that make sense? Well, sure, right? And then we call it law of attraction. Yes. Am I talking about law of attraction? Yes. But I don't use law of attraction because when I hear law of attraction, I think about meditating in the front yard and waiting for the Amazon truck to show up, right? But that's not how life works. It's a full process. So what I discovered is like, you've got action, you've got mindset. And before I started to access this level above that, that's the only way I could coach. Well, if the action wasn't working, you need to find an off-market deal. Okay, well, how are you going to find one? Well, you're like, I could knock on doors and cold call. Well, okay, well then go cold call. And the client would say, I don't like cold calling. And I'd say, why not? And they'd say, because I don't like rejection. And then I would say, well, what kind of man are you going to be if you don't cold call, right? So I would force negative leverage I'd use negative leverage to force misaligned action, right? Because that resistance to cold calling is an intuitive resistance to that. It's misalignment, right? So what I discovered is that we've got action, we've got mindset. There's another circle around it, which I call frame. Frame is the frequency of you. And I know I'm jumping around, but I'll loop it together here. So the frequency of you determines your thoughts. Like we've had times when you're in a happy mood and you have happy thoughts, and sad moods, you have sad thoughts, right? So the frequency of you as a being determines the thoughts you have, which determines the actions you take. What I've also discovered is the frequency of you is how life responds to you. So to get what you want, all you have to do is align your frame with the frequency of you. And what happened is that our brains think that action creates your reality. But it's actually backwards. Your reality creates your action. So the old coaching model, when I didn't have access to frame, I would coach people on mindset and action over and over again, just force action. Now what I do is I literally ignore action and move the client into a frame that's aligned with what they want, because as soon as the frame is aligned, it creates an aligned mindset that generates the right strategy, that generates the right action. It's automatic. It's like a chain link, because the law of attraction literally is the frequency of you as the vibrational frequency of you as a human being determines the thoughts you're having, and that determines the ideas and the strategies and the actions you'll take.
Is this sort of a really elaborate way of saying, I don't mean to oversimplify it. I'm just trying to make sure I'm on the right track. Is this sort of like saying, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, sort of thing?
Well, that's a little bit different, because doing what you love is following your internal guidance, and a lot of us are following our mental guidance too. But not working a day of life is being in alignment with what you're doing. So most people out there are chasing something and they're taking actions and it's not working because they're in a frequency of reality where it'll never happen. So they're trying to solve with action the mismatched reality. So instead of trying to force misaligned action, what you need to do is shift into a frame that's aligned, and then it happens automatically. And literally this new process like invalidated 90% of the coaching tools I used in the past. You don't need them anymore. And as I've been doing this, my client, like I use this process to go from $100,000 in revenue in 2019 to $1 million, grew my revenue 10x the next year. I tripled it the year after that. And I took myself from me to 30 people on the team in about 20 months. And I'm 95% out of business operations. Like I use these tools all the time. So it's almost like that idea of the multiverse, right? There's an infinite number of parallel versions of you. Instead of becoming the one that has it, you shift to the version of you that has it.